My name is Emily, and I will never forget this summer evening in Paris that changed the course of my life. The air was heavy and humid, as it often is in July in the French capital. Our little apartment in the 15th arrondissement, usually so welcoming, seemed stifling that evening. I sat on the edge of our grey velvet couch with my arms crossed, trying to keep calm while my husband, Damien, paced around our living room. The conversation had taken a turn that I had not anticipated. The subject of our argument. The country house that I had inherited from my Aunt Marguerite, an extraordinary woman who had raised me like her own daughter. This house, located in a charming village in Normandy, represented much more than just real estate for me. It was a sanctuary, the last gift from someone who had loved and supported me unconditionally. Emily, be reasonable, Damien insisted, running a hand through his messy brown hair. My parents really need this money. Selling the house could solve all their financial problems. I shook my head, feeling anger rising within me. No, Damien. This house is not for sale. It is my inheritance, my link to Aunt Marguerite. Your parents have no right to it. Damien stopped abruptly, his blue eyes flashing. You don't understand. They might lose everything. How can you be so selfish? These words hurt me deeply. Self-centered. Me who had always been there for him, who had supported his family on many occasions. I stood up, my legs trembling. Selfish? Are you calling me selfish? Who paid your brother's debts last year? Who helped your parents renovate their apartment? Damien dismissed my arguments with a wave of his hand. It was different. This is serious. They could lose their house. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. And I should lose mine. This house means everything to me, Damien. The summers with Aunt Marguerite, the Christmases with the family, the weekends when we escaped from Paris. How can you ask me to sacrifice all that? My husband moved closer to me, his face inches from mine. I could feel his warm breath on my cheek. You don't understand anything about family, Emily. You have always been too independent, too focused on yourself. These words hit me like a slap. How dare he? He who knew my story, who knew how much family meant to me. I don't understand anything about family, I repeated, incredulous. Me who lost my parents at the age of 10? Me who was taken in by my aunt? Don't talk to me about family, Damien. You know nothing about what I went through. I saw his face tighten with anger. He never liked it when I reminded him of my past, as if that somehow diminished his own experiences. Stop playing the victim, Emily. It doesn't work with me anymore. I stepped back, shocked by the harshness of his words. I'm not playing the victim. I'm just trying to make you understand why this house is so important to me. Damien clenched his fists. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the anger radiating from his entire being. You know what? I'm getting tired of your excuses. If you don't want to help my family, fine. But don't come complaining when they're on the street. He took a step toward me, and in his anger he stumbled. His foot landed heavily on mine, crushing my toes in my slipper. The pain was immediate and intense. I let out a cry of pain and fell to the ground, holding my bruised foot. Damien looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw worry in his eyes. But it only lasted a second. His face hardened again. See? Always overdoing it. It was just an accident. I looked at him, incredulous. An accident? You just crushed my foot and you don't even apologize. He laughed bitterly. An apology? For what? For trying to save my family? For hoping that my wife would understand the importance of family solidarity? I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, both from pain and frustration. Damien, please. Help me up. We can talk about it calmly. But he shook his head. No, Emily. I've had enough of your drama. Do you think I need you to take care of me? Look where your arrogance has gotten us. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Damien, wait. I shouted, still on the ground. You can't leave like that. We need to talk about this. But he didn't even turn around. I need some air. Don't wait for me. And with those words, he slammed the door, leaving me alone, hurt and in tears on our living room floor. The silence that followed his departure was deafening. I stood there on the cold floor, unable to move, unable to comprehend what had just happened. How did we get here? How could the man I loved, with whom I had shared so many moments of happiness, treat me like this? Slowly, painfully, I dragged myself to the couch. My foot hurt, but the pain in my heart was much worse. I looked around, observing our apartment. The photos of our wedding on the wall, the memories of our travels on the shelves, everything suddenly seemed false, as if those moments of happiness had only been an illusion. I thought back to our meeting, 5 years earlier, in a small cafe in the Marais. Damien seduced me with his charm, his humor, his kindness. He made me feel special, loved. How could we have gone from these moments of complicity to this violent argument? Hours passed, and Damien did not return. I stayed there on the couch, alternating between anger and sadness. I thought about Damien's words, his accusation of selfishness. Was it true? Was I really selfish for wanting to keep this house that meant so much to me? No, I told myself firmly. It wasn't selfishness. It was preservation. This house was my refuge, my link with Aunt Marguerite, the woman who saved me after the death of my parents. How could Damien ask me to sacrifice that? As the night wore on, I felt a strange clarity settling over me. This argument had revealed cracks in our relationship that I had not wanted to see before. The way Damien had minimized my feelings, the way he had ignored my pain, it all showed me a side of him that I didn't know, or that I didn't want to acknowledge. I stood up, limping to the window. The lights of Paris shone unchanging in the night. This city, which had witnessed so many moments of our history, now seemed indifferent to my distress. That's when I made a decision. I couldn't continue like this. I couldn't stay in a relationship where my feelings, my story, were considered secondary. It was time to take back control of my life, to remember the strong and independent woman I was before I met Damien. Tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow, I would start rebuilding my life, with or without Damien. This night had changed something in me, had awakened a force that I had not suspected. As the first light of dawn began to light up the Parisian sky, I made myself a promise. Never again will I let someone make me doubt my worth. Never again would I sacrifice my principles to please someone else. This night marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new one. A time when I would be in control of my destiny, where I would no longer let anyone decide what was best for me. The sun rose over Paris, and with it, a new Emily was born. A stronger, more determined Emily, ready to face what life had in store for her. The road might be difficult, but I was ready to take it, one step at a time, towards a future that I would build myself. The silence that reigned in the apartment was deafening. Damn. Ian was gone, leaving me alone with my pain and swirling thoughts. I lay there on the couch, unable to move, my foot throbbing painfully. The hours passed slowly, each tick of the living room clock seeming to taunt me. I stared at the ceiling, reliving every moment of our argument. Damien's harsh words still echoed in my head, "You don't understand family." How could he say that? He who knew my story, who knew how important family was to me. My thoughts drifted to my Aunt Marguerite. I remembered his kindness, his warm laughter which filled the house in Normandy. This house which was now at the heart of our conflict. I closed my eyes, trying to remember every detail. The old pear tree in the garden, the creak of the third step of the stairs, the smell of the apple pies that Aunt Marguerite prepared every Sunday. One memory in particular came back to me. I was 12 years old, it was shortly after my parents died. I cried in my room, overwhelmed by grief. Aunt Marguerite came and sat next to me, took me in her arms and said to me, "Emily, my darling, life hurts us sometimes. But we are like the trees in the orchard. Our roots are deep, and even if the storm shakes us, we remain standing." These words resonated with me now, as a reminder of my inner strength. Aunt Marguerite had taught me to be resilient, to never give up in the face of adversity. And now I needed to tap into that strength more than ever. I slowly sat up, wincing at the pain in my foot. I limped to the bathroom to examine the damage. My foot was swollen and starting to turn blue. I immersed him in a bath of cold water, letting the water soothe the physical pain, although it could do nothing for the emotional pain. Returning to the living room, my eye was caught by a photo on the sideboard. It was Damien and I during our last vacation in Nice. We were smiling at the camera, looking happy and carefree. Was it really us? These two people seemed so far away now. I thought about our relationship, how we got here. Damien had always had a strong sense of family, which was what attracted me to him in the beginning. But over time, I had begun to realize that his definition of family was different from mine. For him, family was above all his parents, his brother. I was supposed to integrate into this circle, adopt their priorities, their needs. But what about my needs? From my story? From my family? I realized with a pang in my heart that Damien had never really understood the importance of Aunt Marguerite in my life. For him, she was just a slightly eccentric old aunt who left me a house. I got up and walked towards the window. Paris was slowly waking up. The first light of dawn tinted the sky a pale pink. The bakers opened their shops, the smell of fresh bread began to fill the streets. The city came back to life, indifferent to my personal drama. It was then that I realized something. Despite the pain, despite the sadness, I felt strangely liberated. As if a veil had just lifted, allowing me to see clearly for the first time in a long time. I realized that for years I had tried to conform to the expectations of Damien and his family. I had put aside my own desires, my own needs, to try to fit in. But at what cost? I thought about the woman I was before I met Damien. I had a good job in a marketing company, friends, passions. What had happened to this Emily? She had gradually faded away, diluted into the role of the perfect wife that Damien expected of her. A wave of anger rose within me. Not against Damien, but against myself. How could I let this happen? How could I forget who I really was? I walked to our bedroom and opened my closet. At the very back, behind the dresses and suits, I found an old box. I opened it carefully. Inside were memories of my previous life, photos from my travels, postcards from my friends, my old sketchbook. I leafed through the notebook, rediscovering my drawings, my forgotten projects. There were sketches of the Normandy house, plans to renovate it, make it a place to welcome artists. It was a dream I gave up on when Damien convinced me it wasn't reasonable. Suddenly I knew what I had to do. It was time to become myself again, to find this Emily full of dreams and ambitions. And the first step would be to protect Aunt Marguerite's house, not only from the lusts of Damien's family, but also from my own doubts. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of my best friend, Sophie. It was early, but I knew she would understand the urgency of the situation. "Hello, Emily. Is everything okay?" Sophie's sleepy voice immediately comforted me. "Sophie, I need your help. Can you come?" My voice shook slightly. There was a moment of silence, then Sophie replied, "I'll be there in half an hour." "Hold on, my dear." While waiting for Sophie, I started to make a list. A list of everything I wanted to change in my life, everything I wanted to accomplish. At the top of the list, protect Aunt Marguerite's house. When Sophie arrived, her eyes widened when she saw my state. "My God, Emily, what happened?" I told him everything, the argument with Damien, his hurtful words, his departure. Sophie listened to me attentively, holding my hand. "Emily, I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I'm proud of you. You held on, you didn't give in." His words warmed my heart. "Thank you, Sophie. I need your help next. I've made a decision." I explained my plan to him. I wanted to return to work, regain my financial independence. I also wanted to start renovating the house in Normandy, making it the welcoming place for artists that I had always dreamed of. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "That's a great idea, Emily. You've always had a talent for organization and art. This project is for you." We spent the rest of the morning developing a plan of action. Sophie helped me update my CV and think about companies I could contact. We even made a list of the work to be done in the house in Normandy. As noon approached, I felt exhausted but strangely invigorated. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had regained control of my life. Sophie hugged me before leaving. "You are strong, Emily. Never forget that. And I will always be there for you." After he left, I returned to the window. The sun was now high in the sky, bathing Paris in golden light. I breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill my lungs. Damien still hadn't come home, but strangely, that didn't worry me anymore. Whether he came back or not, I was ready to face what came next. I had found my strength, my determination. I thought about Aunt Marguerite's words. We are like the trees of the orchard. Our roots are deep, and even if the storm shakes us, we remain standing. Yes, the storm had shaken me, but I was still standing. And I was ready to bloom again. Monday morning came faster than I expected. The weekend had flown by in a whirlwind of emotions and planning. Damien had returned late Saturday night, but we had barely exchanged a few words. The atmosphere in the apartment was cold, full of unsaid words and resentments. I got up early, determined to follow through on my resolutions. My foot still hurt, but the pain was bearable. I took a quick shower, put on a suit I hadn't worn in months, and put on light makeup. Looking in the mirror, I saw a glint in my eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. It was a reflection of determination, of newfound hope. I left the apartment without a woe. Rode to Damien, who was pretending to be asleep. The fresh Parisian morning air invigorated me. I walked down the subway steps, blending into the flow of morning workers. It was strange to find myself back in this routine that I had left so long ago, but at the same time, it felt right. My first destination was a recruitment agency specializing in marketing and communications. I had made an appointment the day before, taking advantage of my old contacts. Coming out of Opera Station, I was struck by the excitement of this business district. People were walking briskly, coffee in hand, ready to face another day of work. The interview went surprisingly well. The recruiter, a woman in her 40s named Valerie, was impressed by my background and my enthusiasm. You know, Emily, she said to me as she looked through my CV, it's not every day we see someone with your experience wanting to get started like this. It's refreshing. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride rise within me. I feel like I've been dormant for too long. It's time for me to wake up, to rediscover my passion. Valerie nodded in understanding. I think I have several positions that might interest you. There is in particular a startup in the 11th arrondissement that is looking for a marketing director. That could be a great opportunity for you. We discussed the different possibilities for a while, and I left with several meetings scheduled for the week. Leaving the agency, I felt light, full of hope. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I decided to walk a little before going home. My steps led me to the Tuileries garden. I sat on a bench, observing the tourists strolling around and the Parisians hurriedly crossing the park. The contrast between the hustle and bustle of the city and the serenity of the garden made me think about my own situation. I was at a crossroads in my life, torn between the comfort of what I knew and the excitement of the unknown. But deep down, I knew I had already made my choice. It was time to move forward, to rediscover myself. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophie. So, how did your date go? Fingers crossed for you. I smiled as I typed my response. Very good. I have several interviews planned this week. Shall I tell you all about it over a drink this evening? His response was instantaneous. Perfect. 7 p.m. at Café de Flore. I confirmed the appointment, then decided to return to the apartment. It was time to confront Damien and tell him my decisions. When I arrived, I found him in the living room, looking haggard. He looked up at me, surprised to see me in work clothes. Emily, where have you been? He asked, his voice hoarse. I took a deep breath. I was on a meeting at a recruitment agency. I'm starting to work again, Damien. He looked at me, speechless. What? But, why? Because I need it, I replied calmly. I need to regain my independence, my self-confidence. What happened the other night, it made me realize a lot of things. Damien stood up, approaching me. Emily, I'm sorry for what happened. I was angry, I didn't mean what I said. I shook my head. It's not just about this fight, Damien. It's about me, about who I've become over the last few years. I need to find myself. He looked at me, looking lost. But, What about us? Our couple? I sighed. I don't know, Damien. Right now, I need space to think, to focus on myself. I hope you can understand and respect that. He nodded slowly, looking defeated. I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. It was time to be strong, to think of myself. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. I continued with interviews, rediscovering with pleasure the world of work. Each meeting reinforced my choice, rekindling my passion for marketing and communication. On Thursday, I had an interview with the startup that Valerie had told me about. The company, named Ecovert, specialized in promoting ecological products. As soon as I walked through the doors of their premises, I knew this was where I wanted to be. The atmosphere was dynamic and creative. The walls were covered with whiteboards filled with ideas and sketches. The employees seemed enthusiastic, passionate about their work. I met the founder, a young woman named Chloe, who spoke to me fervently about her vision for the company. "We want to change the way people consume," she explained to me. "Show that we can live ecologically without sacrificing comfort or style." I found myself nodding vigorously, sharing his enthusiasm. "This is exactly what our society needs," I replied. "A change in perception, not just behavior." The interview quickly turned into a lively discussion about possible marketing strategies. I found myself coming up with ideas, getting excited about potential projects. For the first time in a long time, I truly felt in my element. At the end of the interview, Chloe shook my hand with a big smile. "I think we've found our new marketing director," she said. "If you agree, of course." I accepted immediately, feeling a wave of excitement wash over me. As I left the Ecovert premises, I couldn't help but do a little jump for joy on the sidewalk, ignoring the amused looks from passers-by. The same evening, I met Sophie at the Café de Flore to tell her the good news. She raised her wine glass in a toast. "To the new Emily," she said with a warm smile. Or rather, to the Emily who has always been there, and who is finally resurfacing. I toasted with her, feeling a wave of emotion wash over me. "Thank you for believing in me, Sophie. I don't know if I would have had the courage to do all this without your support." She took my hand across the table. "You always had this courage in you, Emily. You just needed a little reminder." We spent the evening discussing my plans, my hopes for the future. I also told him about my idea for the house in Normandy. "I'm still thinking of making it a place for artists," I explained. "But now, I also see how it could fit into my work at Ecovert. A place of ecological creation, where artists could find inspiration in nature." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "That's a wonderful idea, Emily. Aunt Marguerite would be so proud of you." These words touched me deeply. Yes, I hoped Aunt Marguerite would be proud of me. Proud to see myself taking back control of my life, to fight for my dreams. Driving home that evening, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future was still uncertain, of course. There would be challenges to face, obstacles to overcome. My relationship with Damien was still on hold, a difficult conversation I knew I would have to have soon. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right track. I had found my passion, my purpose. I was ready to face whatever life had in store for me, with confidence and determination. As I went to bed that night, I thought of the young girl I once was, full of dreams and ambitions. This young girl had never really disappeared. It had just been put on the back burner for a while. But now she was back, stronger and wiser than before. The next day would be the start of a new adventure. The start of a new life. And I was more than ready to kiss him. The weeks passed at breakneck speed. My new position at Ecovert completely absorbed me, offering me stimulating challenges that I took on with enthusiasm. Every day brought its share of new ideas and exciting projects. I felt like I was coming back to life, little by little regaining the ambitious and creative woman I had been. However, my personal life remained unresolved. Damien and I lived together in heavy silence, barely exchanging a few words every day. I knew a serious conversation was needed, but I kept putting it off, burying myself in work to avoid thinking about it. That morning, I was getting ready for an important meeting. Ecovert was going to present its new marketing campaign to a group of potential investors. I had worked hard on this presentation, putting all my heart and expertise into it. I put on my favorite suit, a navy blue outfit that gave me confidence. In front of the mirror, I adjusted my bun one last time and applied a touch of lipstick. The reflection that looked back at me was that of a confident woman, ready to conquer the business world. "You're out early," Damien remarked from the couch, where he was eating breakfast. I turned to him, surprised by this attempt at conversation. "Yes, I have an important meeting this morning." He nodded, looking thoughtful. "Good luck, then." I thanked him with a nod and walked out quickly, my heart pounding. These few words exchanged, as banal as they were enough to disturb me. I pushed these thoughts out of my mind. Today I had to focus on my presentation. Arriving at the Ecovert premises, I was greeted by the usual excitement. Chloe, the founder, was waiting for me outside the conference room, looking a little nervous. "Emily, I have to warn you," she said in a low voice. One of the investors brought his marketing advisor with him. Apparently, he's a recognized expert in the field. I felt a pang of apprehension, but I firmly pushed it away. "No problem, Chloe. Our campaign is strong. I'm ready to answer any questions." She smiles at me, reassured. "I knew I could count on you. Let's go." We entered the conference room. The investors were already seated around the large wooden table. I looked around the room, assessing my audience. It was then that my heart skipped a beat. Sitting at the end of the table, looking as surprised as I was Damien. Our eyes met, and I saw in his eyes the same shock that I felt. What was he doing here? How was this possible? I didn't have time to dwell on these questions. Chloe had already started the introductions. I quickly composed myself, flashing a professional smile as she introduced me as Ecovert's new marketing director. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice betraying none of my inner turmoil, "I am delighted to introduce to you today our new marketing campaign for Ecovert." I launched the presentation, focusing on each slide, each carefully prepared argument. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Damien watching me intently, taking notes from time to time. As I progressed with my presentation, I felt my confidence grow. The investors seemed captivated, asking insightful questions which I answered confidently. Even Damien's unexpected presence couldn't shake my determination. Finally came the time for questions. The investors seemed impressed, but I knew the real test was coming. Damien raised his hand. "I have a few questions about your digital communication strategy," he said in a professional voice, as if he didn't know me. I nodded, ready to take on the challenge. "I'm listening to you." What followed was an intense exchange, almost a verbal duel. Damien asked pointed questions, challenging each of my strategic decisions. I responded calmly and precisely, defending every aspect of my campaign. To my surprise, I realized that I enjoyed this exchange. It was stimulating, even exciting. I felt fully in my element, capable of standing up to Damien on a professional level. After about 20 minutes of sustained discussion, Damien nodded, a slight smile on his lips. "I have to say I'm impressed. Your strategy is solid and well thought out." I felt a wave of pride wash over me. "Thank you," I replied simply. The meeting ended shortly after. Investors seemed enthusiastic, praising Chloe for the quality of her team. As everyone started to leave the room, Damien approached me. "Emily, can we talk for a moment?" he asked in a low voice. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. We headed to a quiet corner of the office. "I didn't know you worked here," Damien began. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him, incredulous. "And you? How long have you been a marketing advisor for investors?" He looked embarrassed. It's recent. I wanted to tell you, but with everything that happened between us." I sighed. "Damien, we haven't been talking about for weeks. How could I have told you about my work?" He looked down. "You're right. I'm sorry, Emily. For everything." I felt my throat tighten. "Damien." "No, let me finish," he interrupted. "See you today, so confident, so competent. It made me realize how silly I was. I tried to control you, to get you into a mold that was not yours. His words touched me more than I wanted to admit. This is not only this, Damien. It is respect, confidence. You tried to force me to sell the house of Aunt Marguerite. You ignored my feelings, my dreams. He nodded, the heir. I know. I was selfish and blind. I thought I was acting for our good, but I only wounded us both. We stayed silent for a moment, leaving the weight of these confessions to settle between us. What are we doing now? I asked finally. Damien looked me straight in the eyes. I don't know, Emily. But what I know is that I don't want to lose you. Not like that. Not when I just realized how extraordinary you are. I felt my heart tighten. Part of me wanted to throw themselves into his arms, forget all our problems. But another, stronger part knew that it was not so simple. Damien, I appreciate what you say. Really. But I can't just forget everything that happened. I have changed, I grew up. I am no longer the woman you knew. He slowly nodded. I understand. And I don't ask you to become this woman again. I want to get to know the one you have become. If you want to give me a chance. I have a deep inspiration. I can't promise you anything, Damien. I need time to think about it all. I understand, he said slowly. Take the time you need. I will be there when you are ready to speak. We left these words, each returning to their professional obligations. But as I returned to my office, I felt that something had changed. A door had ajar, revealing the possibility of a new start. The rest of the day went through a fog. I answered the congratulations of my colleagues automatically, my mind always occupied by my conversation with Damien. In the evening, I found myself walking along the Seine, seeking to put my thoughts in order. The city's lights were reflected in the water, creating a magical spectacle which contrasts with the tumult of my emotions. On the one hand, I was proud of myself. I had stood up to Damien on the professional level, proving my value not only to him, but also to myself. On the other hand, his apologies and his recognition of his mistakes had rekindled feelings that I thought I had buried. But was I ready to give him a second chance? Could I make him trust him again? And above all, was that what I really wanted? I realized that I had no answers to these questions. Not yet. But for the first time for a long time, I felt that I had the power to choose. Whatever my decision, it would be mine, based on my desires and my needs, not what others expected from me. As I went home, I felt strangely in peace. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, strong from my new self-confidence and certainty that, whatever happens, I would remain faithful to myself. This day had marked a turning point, not only in my career, but also in my personal life. And while I fell asleep that evening, I knew that, whatever the direction that my relationship with Damien would take, I had already won the most important victory, that over myself. The days following the meeting with Damien were a whirlwind of emotions and reflections for me. I plunged into work, seeking to maintain a certain normality in my daily life, but my thoughts were constantly returning to our conversation. One Saturday morning, unable to sleep despite the morning hour, I decided to take the first train for Normandy. I needed to escape from Paris, to find the calm and the serenity of the house of Aunt Marguerite. Maybe there, far from the tumult of the city and the omnipresent memories of my life with Damien, I could finally see things clearly. The train journey was an opportunity to let my mind wander. I thought back to the past few months, to everything that had changed in my life. I had rediscovered my passion for work, I had regained self-confidence. But what about my personal life? Was I ready to give Damien a second chance, or was it time to definitively turn the page? Arriving at the small country station, I took a taxi to get home. The driver, a man in his 60s at the Normandy accent, hired the conversation with the warm familiarity specific to the people of the region. "Ah, do you come to see the Maison des Leblanc?" he asked, taking a look at the rear view mirror. It was a hell of a woman, Marguerite Leblanc. The whole village loved her. I smile, touched by this memory of my aunt. Yes, it was my aunt. I inherited the house. The driver nodded with approval. That's it. Do not let these old houses fall into ruins. They have a soul, you know. His words resonated in me while we were approaching the property. The house appeared at the detour of a turn, majestic despite the obvious signs of negligence. The garden was invaded by weeds, the paint of the shutters was lurking. However, she was still there, solid and proud, as a testimony to the resilience of my aunt. I spent the rest of the morning strolling through the house, opening the windows to let the campaign air enter. Each room was full of memories: the afternoons spent reading in the living room, the joyful dinners in the large dining room, the summer nights to observe the stars from the balcony of my room. It was at the end of the afternoon, while I was sitting on the terrace with a cup of tea, that the clarity that I was looking for finally struck me. This house was not just a material heritage. It was the symbol of all that Aunt Marguerite had taught me: independence, strength, the ability to create a warm and welcoming home. I realized that I could not give up my initial project. This house was to become this place of welcome for artists I had always dreamed of. It was the best way to honor the memory of my aunt, to perpetuate his generous and creative mind. With this decision, I released my laptop and started working on an action plan. I sketched ideas for renovation, a list of the necessary administrative procedures, thought about how I could reconcile this project with my work at Ecovert. The more I walked in my reflections, the more I felt excited and determined. This project was exactly what I needed: a personal challenge that would allow me to grow, to flourish, while paying tribute to my aunt and by creating something beautiful and useful. The next morning, I took the return train for Paris with a renewed feeling of determination. I had made my decision, not only concerning the house, but also concerning Damien and our relationship. Back in our Parisian apartment, I found Damien seated in the living room, the air concerned. He looked up at my entrance, surprised to see me. "Emily, where were you?" I was worried. I put my suitcase and sat in front of him. I was in Normandy, in the house of Aunt Marguerite. I needed to think, to step back. He nodded, waiting for the rest with visible apprehension. "Damien," I started, taking a deep inspiration, "in recent months have been difficult for both of us. We have gone through a lot, and we have changed." "I changed." "I know," he said slowly. "And I'm sorry for everything I have done, everything I said." I raised one hand to interrupt him. "I know you are sorry, and I appreciate your apologies. But it is not only a question of apology. These are who we have become, what we want for our future." I marked a break, looking for my words. I realized that I cannot give up my dreams, my ambitions. The house in Normandy, I want to make this welcome place for artists I told you about. It's important for me, see as a way of honoring my aunt's memory and creating something that really looks like me. Damien listened to me carefully, his face reflecting a mixture of emotions that I could not completely decipher. "And us?" he asked finally. "What about our couple? I have a deep inspiration." "Damien, I love you. Despite all what happened, I can't deny my feelings for you. But I can't go back either. I can't become the woman I was before, the one who put her dreams aside to comply with the expectations of others." He nodded slowly. "I understand. And I will never ask you to become this woman again. I realized how wrong I was to want to change you. So that's what I offer," I continued. "Let us give ourselves a chance to rebuild our relationship, but on new bases. A relationship where we support each other in our projects, where we openly communicate, where we respect the independence of the other." Damien looked at me, a mixture of hope and apprehension in the eyes. "Do you think it's possible? After all that happened?" I smiled slightly. "I don't know. But I think it's worth trying. If we get there, our relationship will only be stronger. And if it does not work, at least we will know that we have all tempted." He handed his hand, taking mine. "Okay. Try it. I want to be there for you, Emily. I want to help you make your dreams, not help it." We spent the rest of the day talking, really talking, for the first time in months. We mentioned our fears, our hopes, our projects. I told him in detail about my ideas for the house in Normandy, and he listened to me with sincere interest, even offering some interesting suggestions. In the evening, when we were sitting on our balcony, looking at the lights of Paris to sparkle in the night, I felt invaded by a feeling of peace. The path to go would undoubtedly be long and sometimes difficult, but for the first time for a long time, I had the impression of advancing in the right direction. I knew that the challenges would not miss. Reconciling my work at Ecovert, my project in Normandy, and the reconstruction of my relationship with Damien would not be an easy task. But I felt ready to take up these challenges, with my new self-confidence and my determination. More importantly, I knew that whatever happens, I would remain faithful to myself. I had found my voice, my dreams, and I would never leave them aside. It was perhaps the most important lesson that this test had taught to me, the importance of remaining authentic, never to lose sight of which we really are. While the night advanced and Paris fell into it, I surprised myself. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of promises and possibilities. And I was impatient to discover what he reserved for me. The months that followed were intense, filled with challenges and moments of joy. My work at Ecovert continued to fascinate me, every day bringing its share of new ideas and stimulating projects. The campaign I had presented during this famous meeting had been a real success, powered the company to new heights. At the same time, I had plunged body and soul into the renovation of the house in Normandy. Each weekend, I took the train to supervise the work, choose the materials, imagine the arrangement of future creative spaces. It was a colossal work, but each progress, however minimal it is, filled me with indescribable pride. Damien, faithful to his promise, supported me in this project. He often accompanied me to Normandy, offering his help for the most physical work and sharing his expertise in project management. Our weekends in the old house had become valuable moments when we are relearning to know each other, to communicate, to build together. One Saturday evening, when we were sitting on the freshly restored terrace, sharing a bottle of local cider, Damien surprised me with a suggestion. "What if we organize ecological marketing workshops here?" he suggested. "It could be a beautiful synergy between your work at Ecovert and your artistic project." I looked at him, astonished and touched by this idea that married my two passions so well. "It's a great idea, Damien. It would make artists aware of the importance of ecology in their practice." He smiles, visibly happy with his suggestion. "And that could attract a different audience, perhaps even companies that seek to green their image." We spent the rest of the evening developing this idea, sketching plans, imagining programs. It was in these moments that I realized how our relationship had evolved. We had become real partners, supporting each other in our respective projects. Spring gave way to the summer, and with it came the long-awaited inauguration of the artist's house. I had decided to call it the Marguerite Refuge, in tribute to my aunt. The house had been transformed, the old rooms had become light workshops, the attic had been fitted out as an exhibition gallery, and the garden now hosted contemporary sculptures. On the day of the inauguration, I stood on the steps, observing the guests who arrived. There were local artists, personalities from the art world from Paris, my colleagues from Ecovert, and of course, Sophie, who had been of unwavering support throughout this adventure. As I was about to give my opening speech, I felt Damien's hand slip into mine. I looked at him, grateful for his presence by my side. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, "welcome to the Refuge of Marguerite. This place was born from a dream, a heritage, and a desire to create a space where art and nature can flourish in harmony." I spoke of my aunt, his love for art and creativity. I mentioned the importance of ecology in our modern world and how artists could play a crucial role in raising public awareness. I finished by thanking all those who had contributed to the realization of this project, with a special mention for Damien. The applause that followed my speech filled me with intense joy. It was the realization of so much effort, so many dreams. Looking around me, I saw the smiling faces of my friends, my colleagues, artists who were soon to live these places. I suddenly had the certainty that I had made the right choice, that I was exactly where I had to be. The weeks following the inauguration were a whirlwind of activity. The first artists in residence arrived, bringing with them a creative energy that transformed the house. The ecological marketing workshops, suggested by Damien, met with unexpected success, attracting participants from all over France. One evening, when I worked late in my office at Ecovert, I received a call from Chloe, the founder of the company. "Emily, I have a proposal to make you," she said without preamble. "What would you say to become a partner? You have done a remarkable job in recent months, and your project in Normandy aligns perfectly with our values." I was speechless for a while, overwhelmed by emotion. "Chloe, I don't know what to say. This is an incredible opportunity." "You don't need to answer right away," she said, laughing. "Take the time to think about it. But know that the whole team would be delighted to have you as a partner." That night, when I got home, I found Damien, who was waiting for me with a candlelit dinner. I told him about Chloe's proposal, still stunned by this news. "It's fantastic, Emily," he exclaimed, visibly proud. "You deserve it so much. You worked so hard to get there." We spent the rest of the evening discussing the implications of this proposal, weighing the pros and cons. Damien listened to me, advised me, but above all, he reminded me to follow my heart. "Whatever you decide," he said, taking me in his arms, "I will be there to support you." These words touched me deeply. I realized how much our relationship had matured, how much we had grown together through all these trials. The months passed, bringing their share of new challenges and satisfaction. I finally accepted Chloe's proposal, becoming associated with Ecovert. This new role enabled me to further develop synergies between the company and the Marguerite Refuge, creating unique opportunities for artists and eco-responsible entrepreneurs. Damien, for his part, had found his way as a consultant in ethical marketing, often working in collaboration with Ecovert. We trained a solid team, both personal and professional, supporting each other in our respective projects. A year after the opening of the Marguerite Refuge, we organized a large exhibition to celebrate the works created by the artists in residence. The gallery was filled with sculptures, paintings, installations, all inspired by nature and made with ecological materials. While I wandered among the works, listening to the enthusiastic comments of visitors, I was overwhelmed by a feeling of gratitude. I thought of my Aunt Marguerite, all that she had taught me. I would have liked that she could see what her house had become, what I had become. Damien joined me, passing an arm around my waist. "What do you think?" he asked gently. I smile, tears in my eyes. How much things have changed. How much we changed. A year ago, I would never have imagined that all this would be possible. He nodded, understanding. "You have transformed a test into an opportunity, Emily. You created something beautiful and significant. You can be proud of yourself." These words resonated in me. Yes, I was proud. Proud to have kept good, to have followed my dreams, to have dared to be myself. The path had not been easy, but each overcome obstacle had made me stronger. That night, when the last guests left and calm fell on the house, I sat on the terrace, as I had done so many times with my Aunt Marguerite. The sky was clear, dotted with stars, and a soft breeze wore the scent of the flowers of the garden. I thought back to everything that had happened since this famous argument with Damien over a year ago. I had gone through moments of doubt, fear, anger. But I also experienced moments of intense joy, pride, accomplishment. I had learned to trust myself, to defend my convictions, not to be afraid of my ambitions. I had learned that true love is not trying to change you, but to help you become the best version of yourself. Damien joined me on the terrace, sitting next to me in silence. We thus stayed, hand in hand, contemplating the starry sky. I knew that the future was still in store for us, but I was no longer afraid. I was ready to confront them, with everything I learned, from everything I had become. As the night advanced, a shooting star crossed the sky. I closed my eyes, making a silent wish. Not for me, but for all those who, like me, were looking for their way. I wanted them to find the strength to remain faithful to themselves, to continue their dreams, to transform obstacles into opportunities. Because it was there, I understood, that true freedom resided, in the courage to be yourself, against everything. And it was a gift that I would always cherish, grateful to all those who helped me discover it. The future stretched in front of me, vast and promising. And I was ready to kiss her, one step at a time, with confidence and determination. Because as my Aunt Marguerite had taught me, life is a trip, and every day is a new opportunity to grow, learn, and flourish. And while the first gleams of dawn began to tint the sky, I knew for certainty that it was only the beginning. The start of a new adventure, a new life. A life that I had chosen, that I had built. An authentically mine life.